Ever tried to learn a new language and just felt like you were staring at this unclimbable mountain of words? It's such a common feeling. But today, we're going to break down a method that shows how anyone, and yeah, I mean anyone, can start learning from absolute zero.
It's the ultimate beginner's dilemma, isn't it? You know the feeling. You open a book, you fire up an app, and bam! It feels like you're already miles behind. That feeling of being totally overwhelmed? That's exactly what we're going to tackle today.
For the longest time, the standard advice was just memorize. Just cram your head full of grammar rules and endless lists of words that feel totally disconnected from how people actually talk. It's frustrating, and honestly, it's just not a great way to learn how to communicate. Okay, so let's get into this. We're talking about a huge shift in how we think about learning a language. It's all about moving away from just studying a language like it's some object in a museum, and instead starting to use it like a tool, right from day one.
And this analogy just nails it. Learning a language is like learning to swim. You can read all the books you want about buoyancy and the perfect freestyle stroke, but until you actually jump in the water, you're not swimming. Language is exactly the same.
So this whole idea is what educators call the communicative approach. And the goal here isn't to turn you into a walking dictionary. Nope, it's to get you communicating, handling the kind of real, everyday situations you'd actually find yourself in.
Yeah, this quote from Auntie Sol sums it up perfectly. The idea is so simple. What you do in the classroom or, on your app should look a lot like what you'll need to do in the real world. It's about prep for real life, not just for passing a test.
Okay, but wait a minute. If the whole point is to communicate, shouldn't you just start talking right away? Well, this is where it gets interesting. A ton of research shows there's this super important first step that almost everyone tries to skip. Just listening. And yep, this is that classic chicken and egg situation, right? If you don't know any words, how can you practice? But if you don't practice, how do you learn the words? The solution, though, is actually pretty simple once you see it. So, the answer is something called task-based language teaching. Forget studying lists of words. Instead, you just complete simple, meaningful tasks. The language itself isn't the main focus. It's just the tool you're using to get something done. This is how you get in the water.
Research on how we learn languages shows that a lot of people, especially kids, go through what's called a silent period. And they're not just sitting there doing nothing. They're actively soaking it all in, listening, connecting sounds to meanings. It's like they're building the foundation of a house before they start putting up the walls.
And this chart really breaks it down. See, as a total beginner, you start with input-based tasks. Your only job is to understand what's coming in, to decode messages. You're just listening, watching, maybe pointing at stuff. The output, actually speaking and writing to create your own messages, that comes a little later.
This early definition of a task is so powerful. Look at what it says. An action is a response to understanding. So what does that mean for a beginner? Well, a task could be as simple as someone saying, point to the blue square. And you point to the blue square. Boom, you just completed a language task without saying a single word. How cool is that?
And this comparison really drives the point home. Research from Natsuko Shintani shows that this task-based approach creates a totally different vibe in the classroom. Instead of those rigid, repeat-after-me drills, you get these longer, more natural conversations. Students aren't just spitting back answers to prove they know something, they're asking real questions to find out information.
All right, so you start with listening, you do some simple tasks, but how does that turn into actually speaking? Well, it turns out there's a really clear step-by-step path you can follow.
The Auntie Sol guide lays out this awesome little roadmap. First, you start with simple controlled drills. Just listen and repeat to get those basic patterns down. Then you move on to practicing short, pre-written dialogues to build some confidence. And finally, you get to the fun part. You start playing around with it, swapping out words, writing your own answers, and really making the language your own.
And look, a drill doesn't have to be some boring, mindless thing. It's a simple back and forth that gets a useful phrase into your muscle memory. You hear the question, what genre do you like to read? You practice the answer, I like reading fiction. Simple. Then you can swap in sci-fi or history or whatever. You're already customizing it.
So after all of this, the listening, the tasks, the drills, the dialogues, what's the payoff? Where does it all lead? It leads to the one thing we all want when we start learning a new language, having a real, actual, spontaneous conversation. And this is what it actually looks like. The Everyday Conversations Guide from the U.S. Department of State. It's jam-packed with exactly the kinds of chats this whole method gets you ready for.
We're not talking about debating philosophy here. We're talking about the real stuff of everyday life.
It all starts with something as simple as this, a quick, casual hello. Hi, Helen. How's it going?
Fine, thanks, and you?
Just fine. Where are you off to? See how natural that feels? That is a totally achievable first goal for any beginner. And then you build up to something a little more practical, like asking for directions. Excuse me, could you tell me where the library is? The language is simple, it's direct, and it's super useful. This is what learning a language for communication is all about.
And finally, you get to a scenario like ordering a meal. I mean, this is a classic situation that can feel really nerve-wracking for a new learner, right? But when you've built up to it with these tasks and dialogues, it becomes completely doable, no sweat.
So let's just wrap up the big ideas here. Learning a language from square one isn't about memorizing the dictionary, it's about changing your focus to pure communication. You start with listening to build that solid base, you use tasks to really get what's going on, and then you work your way up step by step, from simple drills to having real, confident conversations.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? This whole idea, learning by doing, using a skill as a tool right from the get-go. I mean, that could apply to so much more than just languages. What else could we master if we just decided to jump in the water from day one?
Thanks for tuning into this explainer.